So good morning, everyone. My name is Jiannan. So right now I'm a PhD student in operations management at the University of Maryland, and today I'm super excited to share my recent work as of preferencing in algorithmic hiring and empirical evidence and insights, which is a joint work with my fantastic co-authors, Professor Gujia Li. Right now he's at National University of Singapore, and Professor Zhen Jiang from the Ohio State University. And with that, let's get started. So I would like you to think about last time you or someone you know applied for a job. So chances are right now the decisions was not made by a human anymore. So we have an algorithm that will screen all of the candidates' resumes, and then a human or a recruiter will look at the resumes, and that's what we call algorithmic hiring. And for some people, that might sound so amazing to them. If they are so optimistic about AI, right? They will say, oh, it is super fast, and it can also improve efficiency, and our AI can reshape the entire hiring scape. But actually, for other people, there is a warning sign for them. Using these tools, actually, it will maybe lock some people out and amplifying some biases, or making it even harder for people to find jobs, right? Okay, and actually we want to understand what is actually under the hood. So right now for the hiring process, it's actually a two-sided decision process. And on one hand, the candidates, they are using large language models to draft or to craft or to refine the resumes using those tools, right? But on the other hand, we have the recruiters. Actually, what they are doing is to shortlist or screen the resumes using similar tools. So naturally, what will happen here, that will lead to the AI interactions where the model ended up evaluating their own outputs. Oh, that's quite surprising, isn't it? Okay, so then in hiring, it means that maybe sometimes when a candidate happens to use the same model as the model that the company has already deployed, it means that they will get an unfair advantage in this process. So this raises a broader question. So if let's say right now large language models they are sitting on both sides of the hiring table, can we still call this process fair? Okay, so here is when things get a little bit more interesting. Actually, computer scientists recently, they find that large language models can distinguish a text that is generated by itself versus it is written by a human or generated by alternative models. So there are emerging evidence supporting the argument that large language models, they are forming ability of recognition, and it raises a risk. Basically, let's say if AI, they are self-aware, they can recognize their own fingerprints, well, there will be some bias, like the AI may just prefer to their own outputs. So imagine this example. So right now we have a company, and the company has deployed DeepSeek v3 as the evaluator to screen resumes. And then we have a candidate, maybe for some reason they have some insider information and they happen to know the company is using DeepSeek v3 to shortlist candidates. They may say, oh, I'll choose DeepSeek v3 to revise resumes. And in that end, then actually those candidates, they will get unfair advantage in this process. Okay, so actually, based on prior studies, we have found large language models can actually reinforce different kind of biases that we are so worried in our society, such as race, gender, or age biases. So these biases are very well documented in the literature. But for today's talk and for this project, actually we focus on a new and less examined bias, which is self-preferencing bias. So here's a proper definition for this bias. It's the tendency for a large language model to prefer its generated content over the content written by a human or generated by alternative models. And why this question is so important? So as we have seen before, so the first reason is that nowadays in the hiring process, it's a two-sided decision-making process, and we have the candidates, they are using the tools to write resumes, and we have the companies who are using the similar tools to screen candidates. And to that end, actually, there will be a new kind of unfairness, which is not defined by the demographic features, such as race, gender, or age. It is defined by whether the candidate, they are using the same tool as the company's evaluator. Okay, so with that in mind, that's the self-preference bias our study wants to investigate. And we propose the following 3 important research questions. First, does AI exhibit self-preferencing behavior in algorithmic hearing? And specifically, we distinguish 2 forms of bias. The first one is LLM versus human self-preference bias, and the second one is just LLM versus LLM self-preference bias. And later, I will introduce a proper definition for these 2 bias. Okay, and after that, then we want to understand how prevalent is this bias across recently widely used large language models, like both commercial or closed-sourced and also the open-source large language models. And with that in mind, finally, we want to understand what are the mitigation strategies that we can use to help us to reduce this bias, and how effective are these mitigation strategies. Okay. So to investigate this bias, we use a data set collected from a resume builder website. And this data set has about 2,000 resumes. And the data were collected before the era of large language models, so we can make sure every single resume is actually written by a human. Okay, and this data set also spans across like 24 different occupations, so which means there are a lot of heterogeneity that we can explore. And on top of that, this data set is also widely adopted by AI researchers. So, so we have credible evidence to use this data set to support this study. Okay. So here's our definitions about self-preferencing bias. So as I just mentioned, we have two distinct forms of self-preferencing bias. So first, we have the LLM versus human self-preferencing bias. So it is just whether the large language model will prefer its own content generated by itself versus the content written by a human. So naturally, we have like the other form of self-preferencing bias, which is LLM versus LLM self-preferencing bias, and it just captures the tendency for a large language model to prefer the content generated versus the content generated by another model. Okay, so those are the definition on the paper. But in order to investigate this problem, we want to have some operationalization. So we find something from the fairness machine learning literature, and there are some concepts like equal opportunity, and we define our metric based on the equal opportunity fairness metric. So here we have some formula, but let me walk you through the main intuition behind this metric. So as we can see, we are calculating these 2 conditional probabilities. Like we have one on the left and we have one on the right. Oh, sorry. So basically, for the term on the left, we are just calculating the probability when an AI model to prefer its own generated content when the resume is AI generated. Well, for the term on the right, we have the probability for that AI evaluator to prefer the content when the content is actually human written. And as you may notice, we have y equal to 1. And that's something that we consider as a co-founder that we need to control, basically just the content quality of the resume. Okay, so with that in mind, then with that metric, then we design a resume corresponding experiments. So let me walk you through like how we conduct the experiments step by step. So first, we have the original resume. So as you can see, that's a human written one. And then we remove the professional summary, like every first section on that resume to get a redacted resume. And after that, we send the resume to different large language models to ask the model to regenerate what's the professional summary based on the rest of the content. So in this process, actually we can control the qualification of the candidate. So basically it's still the same resume, but just the format or the style is represented in a different way. It's generated by the large language model. And one thing that I would like to emphasize here is like when we create this counterfactual resume, we also control the verbosity bias, because there are also study in computer science showing that large language models may prefer something longer or even more elaborate. So in order to tease out the bias in a more cleaner way, we also control the verbosity bias. So right now we have an original resume and a counterfactual resume. So what we are going to do is to do a pairwise evaluation task. So for each of the large language model, we will present a pair of resume. One is the original resume and the other one is a counterfactual resume. Then we'll ask the model to make a choice, which one is better, and capture that choice using white hats. And I just mentioned, because we want to control the content quality of a resume, we also want to have some sort of a proxy for that metric. So we consider complementary approach. So one approach is to just use the linguistic features as a proxy for this content quality, and the other one is we also recruit human evaluators to get the ground truth label for the underlying content quality of the resumes. And putting everything together, then we can operationalize and calculate what is the LLM versus human equal opportunity self-preference bias. And the entire framework works in the same way for the LLM versus LLM self-preference bias. Okay. So under this framework, then our empirical strategy is quite simple. So the overarching question is just to answer, does the AI model still exhibit self-preferencing when the content quality is controlled? And we just estimate a conditional logistic regression. And here, I would like to draw your attention to the key parameter, which is just beta 1. Basically, for this, the parameter of interest, when positive and significant, it exhibits that the AI model actually has a tendency to favor the content generated over the content human written or generated by alternative models. And specifically, we control the observable content quality through the linguistic features. Okay, so let's see what are the results. So first we have the equal opportunity LLM versus human self-preference bias. So here on the left side, we have three family of models. So we have GPT models, NAMA models, and some other models which is also widely used like DeepSeek, Q1, and Mistral. Well, on the right side, then we have the self-preference bias. So I think one direct observation is that after controlling for the content quality, the self-preference bias is quite pervasive among the different families, and it ranges between 68% to 88% for the major large language models. Okay. So let's turn to LLM versus LLM self-preference bias. So it's not, the bias just exists between LLM versus human. It also exists between LLM versus alternative LLM. So here, we have the DeepSeek V3 as the evaluator, and it's evaluating the summaries generated by itself versus the summary generated by either NAMA 3 or GPT-4o. And you can see there is a clear preference for DeepSeek V3 towards its own resume other than the other two alternative models. But we also test using other LMs as the evaluator. But as you can see here, the results are a little bit mixed here, and we have a little bit more heterogeneity here. And overall, the LLM versus LLM self-preference bias still exists, but it's less pronounced compared to the LLM versus human self-preference bias. Okay, so after establishing the existence of the self-preference bias, we also want to understand the impact of this bias on the algorithmic hiring using a more realistic simulations. So basically, here we simulate a scenario where candidates they will write resumes, and they will and we have different large language models to shortlist the candidates. And our results actually are quite striking. So basically, if the candidates they are using the same model as the evaluator model, though it will be 23% to 60% more likely for the candidate to be shortlisted. And another interesting observation is that actually, we also test the results across different occupations, and we find that the largest disadvantaged group observed, they are related to business majors, such as accounting or sales. Okay. So with all of the results in mind, then naturally, after establishing the existence of the bias, and we have some maybe conservative understanding about its potential impact in the hiring market, then what we want to do is to design some mitigation strategies to help us to reduce this bias and to make the hiring practice more equitable. So what we are going to do is to, based on the potential mechanism behind, because there are, based on previous computer science literature, there are emerging studies establishing the mechanism that actually why a model will prefer its own content is driven by self-recognition ability. So our mitigation strategies are designed to tackle the self-recognition ability. And we consider two simple mitigation strategies specifically targeting this potential mechanism. So the first one we have is basically a system prompting mechanism. And we just tell the model to ignore differences between the human-generated content versus the LLM-generated content. And that's quite intuitive, right? And for the other one, we have the majority voting, which we have an example of large language models where we try to dilute some of the models' recognition abilities. Because in the literature, we know some of the smaller models, such as Llama 3.11 billion or Llama 3.22 billion, they do not recognize themselves very well. And we construct a balanced example in order to mitigate this self-preference bias. And we have, even though those mitigation strategies, they seem to be very simple, but we have some good news. So actually the AI self-preference bias, while it's widely separated, actually is also attackable. And with these two simple but effective mitigation strategies, it can be reduced over 50%. Okay. So, so to conclude this talk, let me give you some key takeaways. So first, our paper provide the first empirical evidence about AI self-preference bias in algorithmic hiring. And we know that large language models, they prefer their own generated resumes over human written resumes by a large amount. And we observe a very significant LLM versus human self-preference bias. And beyond that, we also assess the potential impact of this bias, and we find that using these simulated experiments, those candidates, they are using the same model as the evaluator's model. They are 23% to 60% more likely to be shortlisted. But with the two simple but effective mitigation strategies, actually we can still effectively reduce this bias. So I think one potential major implications about this paper is that actually we reveal a new form of self-preferencing we found this challenge. It's not based on the demographic features, and we have so many regulation discussions about how to make the hiring practices more equitable and fair, like in terms of race, gender, or age. But actually, it's also important to consider this new type of emergent AI interactions bias that may potentially disadvantage some of the candidates. And with that, I will conclude my talk. Our paper is posted on SSRN, so so feel free to check the paper if you are interested in, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Jiannan. We have time for maybe 2 questions.
Yeah. Yes.
Very interesting setting. I have a question which may not be
Sure.
But how can a job seeker know what kind of model the company uses? If the job seeker is able to know what model the company uses, that's a good signal because the job seeker has done the best.
Yes. Yeah, I think for our paper, the position is we kind of fear there are some potentials if the candidate is using the same model as the company's model, then there might be some unfair advantage. But so you are saying there might be some applicants, they are very strategic and they have the information, and that can even make the results even more pronounced, I'll say, if they have the information whether the company is using the same model or not.
Yes, I'm thinking maybe the company wants to think about it, think more strategic. There are many different kind of dirty skills.
Yes.
Instead of finding a job. So this may be one of it, and company may like this person or not. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, maybe I need to think more about that. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, please.
Can you tell us a little bit more? You said one of the outliers, or one that didn't seem to resonate or follow the trend for certain business positions, included in Calgary.
Yeah.
Can you can you speak a little bit more, because there were a lot, I mean, finance, online, and others, it just, maybe because I teach accounting there. So, I mean, even fitness was using more than, why did you think that certain business-related fields, such as accounting, had a disadvantage by using the LLMs to create the resumes? Maybe I shouldn't be so specific about accounting, but since it was put on that. But even, let's say, some of the other, top areas, sales, accountant, business development, finance. Why would, could you explain a little further, maybe the research?
Yeah, I think right now.
Advantage?
I think right now I have some, sorry, I just cut you off. Yeah, I kind of have some conjecture about this because the evidence is still very descriptive. But maybe for some business-related fields, like when they craft their resumes, it's like for some specific category of jobs, the way how they draft their professional summary is a little bit different from other categories. Like for more technical-oriented jobs, maybe there was specific mention like what are the job-specific qualifications I have, like in a more quantitative way. But for more business-related fields, more like people-facing fields, they may emphasize different abilities. And that's like one thought that I may think about like how to explain the differences. But that might be a very interesting direction to explore as potential mechanisms. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.